Hi everyone, Ollie here. Now I'm just trying to distract myself from Easter revision by taking a little break to record a video on something that I get asked about a lot, and that is the Not Warwick thread on Studentroom. So what this is, for those of you who don't know, I can't remember when it was. I'll be able to tell you in a minute because I have it up on my phone. But a user on Studentroom posted a really quite negative essay view of their experience studying at Warwick Medical School. And I've had quite a lot of emails now from people asking me kind of my own thoughts to confirm or verify certain elements of it or indicate if they're in fact not true. And I'll leave a link in the video description to that thread so you can go and check it out for yourselves. I want to say right at the beginning of this video that I don't know who the Not Warwick user is. I may well have actually met them. I don't know if they're still studying here or what, but their view may have been, may have been entirely correct for them as far as they saw things. I'm not trying to say that their experience isn't valid. What I'm going to try and do is assess each point that is made and then compare it to my own experiences and see what I think. So excuse me for reading from my phone, but it's quite a long post, so I'm just going to go through it section by section and give you my answer to each. And this was actually posted in 2017. It was a year ago. In fact, it's now March 2018. I think this is March 2017. But the first point is shambolic teaching and often unintelligible lecturers with some notable exception. At least in my experience, again, I'm only a first year student. We've finished block 4, now in the Easter holidays. We've got one block left before the year 1 exams. I don't feel like the teaching has been shambolic. I think the vast majority of the time, the timetable has been kept to. And when it's had to be altered because lecturers are sick or whatever, they've usually given us good notice. There's been a couple of times when that slipped and we've maybe found out the night before or whatever, but I wouldn't say there's been anything massively disruptive. And we are given a list of learning objectives and things for each lecture now. The only thing I will say is that sometimes, and this is only a problem when you have guest lecturers, which are the ones, if there are going to be unintelligible lectures, it's when the guest lecturers come in and do a one-off lecture on something, because they get consultants who are experts in the relevant field to come in and teach. And unfortunately, not everyone is a fantastic teacher, or at least these consultants, just for whatever reason, don't always come across very well. So if that is going to be true, it's always with a guest one. I've never had that experience with any of the core teaching. The second point is chaotic organisation of clinical learning, absent, uncooperative or retired assigned consultants, and often admin, rotas, timetablings left to students to organise or fight out between one another. In terms of clinical learning in year 1, I haven't had this problem either with my clinical skills teaching on a Friday. Admittedly, some of the staff are retired there, but they're only teaching you clinical skills. And if this is about in hospital teaching in the later years, it hasn't been a problem for me. I've been based at George Eliot Hospital where all the consultants seem to be really good. But if this is referring to later years in terms of fighting out clinical opportunities, that's really something I can't comment on. Unhelpful CBL process is number 3. That's just not something I agree with. I think with CBL, it definitely doesn't work for everyone. Personally, I think if you engage with it and as a group you make an effort to engage with it, you can get a lot out of it. I've definitely learned a lot from my colleagues teaching me things in CBL, and because of the various different backgrounds that Warwick students have, because they accept science and art students, I think personally you can get a lot of different angles out of CBL. And the key thing, as I say, if you can get the whole group, or at least the majority of the group, to engage with the CBL process, then I think it's a great use of time. Unsupportive medical school staff when there are problems, feedback usually ignored. Not something I have experience of. I've not heard that to be true in things that people have told me about their interactions with various members of staff, although equally I suppose if they were getting support, it's a sort of self-selecting system where they'd be unlikely to tell other people anyway. I hope that's not true. I've heard no evidence of that being true, but I can't really comment. You're treated like a child except for when you need something, then you're an adult learner. Right, I think this is a difficult one, and it's one that is potentially true, but in my situation, understand that I'm 21 now. I've come straight through school, straight through my first degree, and now I'm doing a second degree, but I'm still very much in that I am here to be taught, or I am willing to learn mindset. And that's not true of everyone on the course. I feel like the older people get, even the older I get, the more likely I am to sort of stand up for myself or say if I'm finding things irritating or not useful. I think with some of the staff, that can be true, that you're sort of talked to like a child, but it's definitely not true for all of them. But remember that in my position, that's all I've ever been used to. I actually feel like the vast majority of the staff, the core teaching staff certainly, will take you seriously if you bring up a concern. Vindictive witch hunts by the APG, which I think is the Assessments Progress Group, if that's what that's referring to. Basically the medical school Stasi, a classic case of pathetic power-crazed bureaucrats getting a kick from bullying terrified students, many students unfairly affected by this with no rights to appeal. I really don't know what this means, and we've had a talk now on basically engagement and the role of the APG. So the APG is the group that sort of decides whether or not, as far as I understand it, let's use me as an example. The APG will decide in conjunction with the exam board whether or not I am fit to move forward into the second year. In order to do that, not only do I have to pass my exams, I have to show a certain level of attendance, which is above 80% of sign-in activities, and engagement with the course. So that's doing things like completing all the formative assessments on time, submitting all the reflections, the case reports, generally doing the tasks that the med school tells me they want me to do. I think it is true that the pressure of it's not necessarily their fault. The pressure of the environment, particularly in conjunction with what we've seen the GMC do, I think it's more the GMC that everyone is terrified of than the APG necessarily. But I think what happens is everyone's worked so hard to get into med school, it would completely wreck most of us, if not all of us, if we were kicked out for whatever reason. It's very easy to see the APG as witch hunters. Personally, I don't. That's just their job. And I think kind of strong extraneous circumstances aside, at least in first year, it's been difficult to fall foul of the APG. So again, I don't really agree with the statement, but then I've not had any direct experience of challenging them myself. A poisonous atmosphere of fear and mistrust. The med school recruit informants among the student body to inform on fellow students in order to prosecute FTP, that is fitness to practice, cases against them that taint their records. People are now reluctant to confide things in others or let their hair down and have fun at parties. Again, FTP is something that we're all, I think, on some level slightly frightened of. So a fitness to practice case can be brought against you for like public misconduct or just breaching any of the myriad things that the GMC doesn't want you to do. And it definitely does make us kind of edgy sometimes when you're not sure whether you might be stepping over the borderline for something really menial. In terms of the specific claim about the med school having informants in the student body, I really have no idea what that's talking about. Maybe I'm just not aware of the Stasi. Maybe they're so kind of well disguised among the student body that I haven't heard about them. But that's certainly not something I've heard of, an FTP case being brought against a student by another student. It may well have happened. Again, I don't want to make the claim that it never has happened, but it's something that I'm certainly not aware of. Scant anatomy teaching and no dissection, although the anatomy teaching that there is of an exceptionally high quality. Other than the no dissection part, which there isn't dissection, it's done through plastinated specimens, which I hold are actually, I think, a better way of learning clinical anatomy rather than surgical anatomy. So again, this is an old post, but that's actually, the anatomy teaching at Warwick for me has been the highlight of the course. I think it's amazing. The two main lecturers that teach anatomy, that is Professor Richard Tunstall and Dr. Jamie Roebuck, it's like, I think the quality of the anatomy teaching is fantastic, particularly in conjunction with the Friday anatomy teaching. That, I would say, if you're really interested in anatomy, maybe want to become a surgeon, come to Warwick. Ludicrous parking situation. Realistically, you need to own a car but aren't allowed to park near the medical school in any year or at the hospital in first year. One parking permit between two thereafter. The med school prohibit you from politely writing to locals to ask to rent their driveways. The parking situation is a bit of an iffy one. So in my experience, I don't drive myself, but I live with two that do in my house. So what we would do early on in the year is we would drive, park on the main uni campus car park, and then it would be like a 10-minute walk up to the med school campus, and we'd pay £4.50 parking for the day, which we just split between us. Now what we've managed to do is get a med school car park permit, which just allows us to park at the med school every day, which we do, and we haven't had any problems. And it's, I can't remember off the top of my head how much it costs, but it's much, much cheaper than paying £4.50 every day. So that is something that you can do. You aren't allowed to park at the hospital in your first year. Again, we park in the hospital car park every week without issue. It does cost, I think, £9 or £10 for the day, again, which we just split between the house. Everyone has to pay that. And we've been given parking permits when we've been on bedside teaching as well, so that's really not something that I've had any issues with. The med school prohibit you from writing to locals to ask to rent their driveways. Again, I don't know, I've not had to do this. I know what a lot of people do is they park away from campus in kind of residential areas, and the locals do get iffy about that and will leave quite rude notes on people's windscreens saying, like, don't park here please, like, and threatening to have people towed. But it is legal for students to park there, so they continue to do that. Yeah, the parking situation isn't fantastic, but it is what it is. Never-ending time-wasting learning tasks designed to keep med school staff in a job and tick some GMC boxes rather than further your education. Some of the tasks I think can be a tiny bit of a waste of time, or things that necessarily wouldn't have to be kind of directed lecture time. I think you'd be better off learning them yourself, like a lot of sock pop stuff. But in regards to keeping people in a job and ticking some GMC boxes, if they are GMC tick boxes, you would have to do them wherever you were, because the GMC stipulates you have to do them. That's why they're a tick box. So I don't feel like that's something you can really get away from. Drab, grim, depressing part of the world, Coventry, Nuneaton, little in the way of culture. I mean, yeah, I think that's one of the ones I'm closer to agreeing with. It's not a fantastic part of the world. That said, I do live in Leamington, which is a very, very pretty, albeit slightly expensive area. If you came from a city, so I came from Newcastle before, there's definitely a lot less going on. Like, if you wanted a really good night out, you'd probably want to go to Birmingham, which is close and easily accessible by train. For me personally, it's not a huge thing. Like, I was never a massive club goer. I'm just kind of here to learn medicine, and if you have that attitude, then you'll be totally fine. Either endure endless driving, traffic jams, or horrific public transport. Took me over 2.5 hours to get home from hospital once, as I can't afford to run a car. That is true. The public transport is pretty unreliable. Sometimes buses just don't turn up, or they go past without picking you up, which can be really annoying, and I say that as someone who doesn't drive, so occasionally I am dependent on buses, and they are notoriously poor. That is one of the downsides of coming to Warwick Med School, I think, is the public transport, but it is dealable with, and I think you can manage it. Just make sure you kind of plan beforehand to travel with someone who has a car, of which there are many. Speaking as someone who doesn't drive myself, it hasn't been a problem for me. Virtually no social integration with the main university, geographically and socially distant. I mean, socially, yes. Geographically, no. It's a 10-minute walk, if that, between the medical school campus and the main campus, and I'm not really sure what you would expect necessarily in terms of social integration with the main uni. There's nothing stopping anyone joining societies that are part of the main SU building. I think the reason it would be socially isolated is because the SU building is on main campus. That's where you would expect it to be, and like, I've joined things on main campus and had no problems, and so has, virtually everyone. That's just not a thing. The new curriculum is just an opportunity for career educators to build their CVs and experiment with teaching fads before springboarding onto a med school. This curriculum is disruptive and unpopular with students and staff as continuity is lost and reduced chance to build a relationship with hospital teams. I really, really can't comment on this because I've only experienced, the newest version of the curriculum. I'm not really sure what it's talking about in terms of experimenting with teaching fads. Most of the teaching has been virtually the same throughout, with the odd bit of mindfulness thrown in. And certainly in terms of a day here, an afternoon there, with regards to like the bedside teaching and stuff I've had, I think that's all you need, at least in year one. Again, I haven't experienced the later years, can't comment on that, but in terms, the only thing with bedside teaching, I'd maybe like to have a full day instead of half a day so I could get more done, but then there's limited teaching staff and they need to do their jobs as well, so I don't know. Competing for learning opportunities with physician associate students, Birmingham Uni med school students and even other Warwick students as smaller hospitals become overwhelmed. I've heard about this but never experienced it myself, and I'm based in one of the small hospitals. Again, that might be true as I progress through the course. It's not been true for me yet. Bossy, confrontational, self-important administrators. I mean, I think that depends who you talk to. I don't think I've had that experience with anyone. I've met the lovely ones, clearly. There may well be bossy ones. If so, I haven't spoken to them. Uninspiring med school building, no true common area. Main campus is an ugly solar sprawl, although this is subjective. Uninspiring med school building. I think it's very pretty. It's sort of modern glass, quite nice. It does its job. No true common area. I'm not sure, again, whether... because we have a common room now. That's why it was kind of confusing me, and I go there a lot. So maybe they didn't have one when this was written. Main campus itself is an ugly soulless sprawl. Again, I kind of agree, but that's only from coming from a red brick uni. Do they call it a plate glass uni, one of the more modern ones? It's very functional. I wouldn't have said the campus is remarkably pretty, but there's a lot of buildings on it and it seems to have a lot of resources. And I'm sure I've seen a point about green spaces somewhere. There's a wood, like Gibbet Hill Wood, between the campus and main campus, so if you want a green space, and there is a green space on the med school biology campus, but then there's a massive wood, so if you want to go for a walk, go in the wood. Virtually no holidays after first year, although as they do point out in the post, this is probably similar on any GEP course. I think that is correct. The library at the med school itself is tiny with no lending facility. I don't actually use the library facilities, or at least I haven't in first year. I go there to study, but I really don't think that's a big deal. Worryingly high incidence of dropout deferral due to depression and anxiety. There's no figures quoted, and I don't have any figures for you. I really can't comment on that. I hope that's not true, but again, like, I have no figures to actually assess that claim, so I'm not going to comment. Thousands of pounds wasted on pointless non-functional technology hardware. Again, don't know. I think that's true wherever you go in any learning environment. And again, even if that was true, it's kind of not your money. Like, I'm not sure the uni is going to spend money on what it wants to. Unsympathetic response to genuine hardship grant applications. Again, don't know, haven't submitted a hardship grant application. The only thing I will say is that I feel like, again, it's vulnerable to a bit of self-selection by the poster. If the poster themselves has gone through what they consider to be a genuine hardship claim and it hasn't been accepted by the university, they are more likely, I think, to be angry about it, which might well be a fair response. I don't know, haven't submitted one for myself. Rip-off, cash-grabbing canteen in coffee shops, no subsidised student dining. Yep, that is true, the canteen and coffee shops are expensive. I think that's true virtually wherever you go. Just bring your own food, it's much cheaper anyway. I wouldn't recommend buying food at the uni, like wherever you are if you can help it. Just bring some instant coffee as well, there's plenty of stuff in the common room kitchen. Rock bottom student satisfaction. Don't take my word for it, ask around, do some research. This is true, this is something that the staff actually addressed with us. I don't know specifically what it's about, so just my rundown. I've loved the course. I haven't had any major problems with the teaching or the way things are done. I've had a fantastic time. Maybe I'm just happy to be here studying medicine. And credit to the med school, they have acknowledged the very negative feedback they've gotten from some groups. I don't know the details of everything, but I think they are doing what they can to address it. They do seem to want feedback from us all the time and act on a good proportion of it, so I really wouldn't be worried. The big thing I want to address is if this post has put anyone off potentially applying to Warwick, don't let it do that. Consider this my look at it. If you want to study medicine, you want to learn some anatomy really, really well, you want to have good exposure to clinical learning opportunities, and become a good doctor by the end, I think Warwick will set you up as well as anywhere to help you do that. I hope that clears that up, guys, at least from my perspective. Remember, that's just my take on all this, but I hope you found it useful. Take care.